Hi everyone, I'm Daphne from IBlieve and welcome to our college series. IB Year 2 students and graduates from all over the world have gathered the best tips and tricks which can help you in your college application process. We know at times it can seem daunting, but we hope through this series that we can help you gain more confidence in yourself and in your abilities because we believe in you.
So the first one we have here is how does the admission process work for the UK?
So for the UK, you apply to all your universities through UCAS, which is a centralised system. And if you're applying to Oxford, then the deadline is usually October in the year before you want to attend. Or if you're doing deferred, then like 2 years before you want to attend. Or the deadline is January, but then it's also quite flexible. You write one 4,000 character personal statement focused on your subject, on the courses that you want to take. And then your school usually does a lot of the sending your predicted grades. You just fill in your info and send it off. And then you get decisions around January to May of the year that you want to start uni or the year after.
Well, I would only add that the cost is approximately £30 now for 5 universities, but then for one university it's like £23. So that's something to consider.
I think the only other thing I would add is that depending on where you apply to, you might have interviews after you submit your UCAS. But your personal statement, you might have interviews, or there might be tests that you require to take, depending on the university and of course the course.
Well, from my personal experience, while writing personal statement, you also have to be aware that it's 4,000 characters, but it also has number of lines, the limit of number of lines. So you should be also aware of that.
Okay, great. That's interesting. The next question is, are there any additional tests that you need to do for application?
So I know for people applying for med school, you might have to take the BMAT or the UCAT. I know that you need to look at the university as well. Some universities accept the BMAT, some universities accept UCAT. So that's something you could consider, whether you want to take both tests or you just want to take one and then base your uni decisions off which university allows whatever test you decided to take. And then so I know that for Oxbridge, there tend to be quite a few pre-interview assessments. Because I applied to engineering, I had to do this thing called the engineering admissions assessment. Yeah, so these are just some of the tests that you might have to do. Something else that you might want to consider is that because I took the IB in November, these tests also happen around November. So I did my pre-interview assessments on the same day that I took my chemistry IB exams. So one thing to note is that you need to be truthful with yourself and see if you're able to handle the stress, even studying for your exams, or willing to give up a certain amount of time to do these tests. Yeah.
I did a history test for Oxford, and then I know if you're studying law, then you might have to do the LNAT for some universities.
Oh, and as international students, we are required to take English exams to prove our proficiency in the language. But most of the times the IB diploma itself can make up for that requirement with English B or English A language and literature.
As an international student, I took IELTS. As any test would be, IELTS is offered on certain days, and personally it was not cheap at all. It was quite expensive. It was like $260 in Korea. So you have to prepare yourself greatly so you won't have to take it many times. And the test is also time consuming, so it would be great if you consider early stage, it's only 2-year certificate, so you have to also consider that. But anyway, study well before you take the test so you won't have to take a lot of it.
Is it true that the expenses are going to be higher than usual when applying to the UK?
This might be a personal case, but if it's meaning application fees, UK is of course much cheaper than US, because for US each school costs $80 or so. If it means in terms of university tuition, it might differ by school. But anyway, for international students, if we put the situation that you won't get any kind of financial aid from the US colleges, I think UK is a little bit more affordable compared to the US, even though UK might not give financial aids to international students.
Yeah, I totally agree with what she said. In terms of admission fees, okay, UK might seem cheaper. I actually only applied to one school, so my UCAS alone only cost me £20, but because I applied to Cambridge, I had to do the COPA, which cost another £30. I had to take the engineering assessment test, which cost me another $180 Singapore dollars. And I had to pay for my interview, which was conducted online. So that was another £50. On top of that, I had to do the IELTS, which cost me another $260. So in total, even though I only applied to one school, it cost me almost $700, which is quite a lot. Yeah, so I guess that is kind of only because I applied to Cambridge and there were many other tests and things that I had to do. So generally, I would say it's still cheaper because your UCAS could go to 5 different schools. And I think if you apply to more than one school, it'll be about £25. So it definitely still is much cheaper. But in terms of financial aid for like college fees, UK doesn't give any financial aid for international students. So the thing about the US is that even as an international student, there is the ability for you to get financial aid based off merit or based off need-based financial aid.
How do you determine your safety, target, and reach universities?
I think when I was talking to my friends about applying to UK unis, we didn't really use those terms that much. I think that probably applies more to the US process, but it's still like a good idea to make sure that you're giving yourself a safety net. And the best way to do that is just doing it in a really informed way by looking at the grades, the predicted grades that they asked for, and then looking at the data of like the average grades of people that get accepted. And I think that probably gives you like the most objective sense of like whether you need to apply to schools with lower predicted grades needed as well. But obviously don't be put off because like that's just data, and that'll also be looking at your personal statement and wanting to get a sense of you as a whole. So just kind of balance like looking at the data and then applying where you really want to go.
What do colleges usually look for when determining who to accept? So, a bit objective question, but do you think it's the UCAS statement? Is it the grades, the extracurriculars? What do you guys think?
I personally think that the grades from the IB are quite important in UK applications in relation to US applications. But then it really depends on the university, but the personal statement really counts as of choosing, like if we have two students of whose predicted grades are quite similar, who do we choose? I guess they rely on the personal statement. And then if the university itself asks for admissions tests, they would also consider that for shortlisting applicants for interviews or further assessments.
I agree that the personal statement is important. I'm not sure if this was only applied to my friends or not, but they kind of consider UCAS personal statements not as like weighed highly compared to the US. But I also kind of believed it, but when I actually had an interview with Imperial, the interviewer actually read he remembered certain parts of my personal statement, which meant that he kind of considered highly than we actually think that they would, because UCAS doesn't have like specific spaces where you can like say about what you did other than academics. So, but that is related to your major. I think that is the part where you can actually write about your passion, and they could remember your passion and make you a more competitive applier.
Yeah, definitely the main things they're looking for are that you're good at the subject and you like it enough to commit to it, to doing almost only that for 3 years. So that's what you really need to convey in your personal statement. But I agree, it is like hard to like write a really stellar personal statement because it's always going to feel a bit cringy, and like you can be less personal than you can in US essay. So it's more just about like kind of doing what you can with it and just making sure you don't stick out for the wrong reasons, and just kind of showing that you're a really good writer, you've done reading, that kind of things. But you don't have to make it like a kind of really inspirational thing that you would see in maybe a more personal essay.
I think interviews, if you have interviews, I think generally international students tend to get interviewed quite a bit. So I think they do matter quite a lot to the universities, especially if you're talking about Oxbridge. Those interviews can be quite weird, and I think they are generally quite important to the university. A similar experience, I also was asked some questions which I couldn't answer relating to something that I wrote in my personal statement. So they do look at your personal statement, but I feel like that's just more to see your passion and interest. And I don't think they would mark you down too much just because you couldn't write an amazing personal statement. But of course, do try your best to like write it with some flair and some sense.
What are the key points to focus on while writing my UCAS personal statement?
I kind of approached it as a mini essay about why I found history really interesting. So I brought in a few books that I'd read over the summer, and then like talks that I'd gone to, and then I tried to have a kind of thread going through about like why that made me want to study history for the next 3 years, like both why I found the subject itself interesting, and then why I liked the skills that you use when doing it. So just make sure that initially it's really hard to write, so you just kind of have to sit down and just make yourself write out why you enjoy the subject, and then turn that into something that sounds a bit more sophisticated using evidence. So just try and link it together, make sure that you're using language really effectively, making sure like every sentence is important. And I know my first draft was way too like complicated. I like tried to make myself sound smart by using words that weren't really comprehensive. So like remember that it might not be read by like a history professor. It will be initially read by like someone like your family, like someone who isn't really experienced in the subject. So make it interesting to anyone who's going to read it, as well as showing that you're really interested in the subject itself.
Yeah, I think something Imogen brought up was a lot of the super curriculars that she did. I think that's like something quite important for UK universities, definitely. Super curriculars are basically things outside of your academic work that is related to the course that you want to apply to. So personally, I didn't have that many super curriculars, which is why it was kind of difficult for me to write my personal statement. So instead of focusing on things that I didn't have, I decided to write a more story-based personal statement where I had a central theme, which I brought up in my introduction. And then what I did was that I basically listed out all the things that I did, even if they weren't really related to my course specific, like engineering specific. And I tried to link them to the theme of the essay. And then, of course, the theme was still science-based, because engineering definitely has some STEM involved in that. But yeah, so that's one way you could go about focusing on the things you've done and how they link to the course that you're interested in. Yeah, I think you don't have to have too many, like going for like all these like science competitions or like essay writing competitions. But if you're able to bring out your true passion, even if you just attended one of them, and how you really felt that you grew through the experience, it's better to reflect than to just have a list of everything you did.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. They're looking for people whose like essays they'll enjoy reading like every week, and so they'll enjoy less like reading about the competitions that you won in your summer school than they'll enjoy like reading about your conclusions on a book you've read. So I think that is more important, and don't worry if you don't have like all the experiences, because the thinking is more important.
Yeah, I also agree. Like for me, I only wrote one extracurricular, and then I rather focused on what I learned through that experience. And also my whole kind of flow of the essay was what sparked my passion and how I use my academic opportunity to actually develop or like learn more about it. And then the extracurricular where I kind of showed my passion. And also in the end, I wrote what I want to do in the future using this education that I will receive from their universities.
What are some do's and don'ts for the UK application process?
I think maybe a don't is don't obsess over it. Like after you've sent in your form, there isn't much you can do. So like don't spend all your evenings on student forums or reading all the information or doing like really detailed analysis of data to like pick where you're going to choose. Like that is much less important than just writing what you like about in the personal statement and then just like stopping thinking about it until you get those emails from UCAS. Like just try and like make sure that you're not giving too much mental energy to the process beyond what you need to do your best.
Yeah, I think one other thing is, I guess this for when you're choosing your school, don't worry too much about like rankings. I know for the US they always like to release things like your the acceptance rates and stuff like that. UK schools don't really have that, but you can see from online like the kind of responses that people give and how difficult a school might be to get in. I think don't let that discourage you from applying to a school if you really want to go there. But also you want to be realistic with yourself. If you think that you can't make the grade requirements, then it's fine. Choose a school which you think that where you would really benefit the most from, where it can push you, but you'll still be able to manage in the course.
Yeah, related to that, like, don't think that there are only like 2 or 5 good universities in the UK, because there are so many amazing universities where you'll get a great education and like meet loads of amazing people. So even though sometimes it can seem like Oxbridge is the only place to go, or like those London unis are the only place to go, it's very much not true. And like all the news stories you see about that are kind of just like bolstering their own reputation. Like they're feeding into this to try and make it seem like they're the only prestigious schools in the country, and that's why everyone wants to apply. But when you actually look at the education you're going to get, or what jobs are considering, like what employers are thinking about you, then it really does not make that much difference, as long as you're going to a university where you're going to be doing work and enjoying your subject. So try not to be sucked too much into that prestige conversation.
I guess on another note, doing the essay like last minute is not a good idea. I tried, it wasn't a good idea. I applied for the Oxford deadline. Don't do it. Please take the summer to decide mainly what universities you want to apply, and look throughout like what skills or aptitudes you would want to mention in your personal statement for like for universities to consider you and stuff. So don't rush the process. So yeah, that's mainly just to avoid stress, because it's September, October, which you just started the second year of IB, and it's just quite a lot of workload to carry on.
This might be like way earlier than you might think, but for certain majors, they have certain IB subjects they want you to take. So when you choose your DP subject, you can always you have the chance to change DP subjects. But anyway, when you choose it, be aware of the specific requirements. If you're thinking about applying to UK universities, especially. For example, for engineering, you might have to take math HL and physics HL. So you have to think about it early, because, for example, they require chemistry HL and you haven't took it, and you can't apply anymore, even though you really want to go to that school. So be aware of it.
Yes, I agree. And moving on, the next question is, how did you navigate the dynamic between your parents, counselors, friends, and yourself during the application process? What did you do to, I guess, deal with that?
I think one thing to remember is that when you're talking to adults about the university application process, so like your teachers or your parents or your friends' parents, then their understanding of the universities are based on like things that happened 20 or more years ago. So they will have an initial reaction to each university based on the kind of reputation that it had when they were 18, maybe in like the 1960s. So don't be swayed too much by that. The world is changing, and so like try and do your own research to find your own information, and like don't base your decisions on reputations that have been like built up over decades and are like driven by people who haven't been at university for decades.
Yeah, so one thing I did maybe isn't too great, but I didn't really tell my parents I was applying to university until I actually did, just because I thought that the pressure of them asking me, oh, when will you know this and when will you know that, might just be a bit too much. So I ended up, which was kind of the reason why I ended up paying for everything on my own. So maybe that wasn't too good, but I guess it really depends on your parents. I know some parents might be quite chill about where you apply to, they don't really mind. I was afraid that my parents might get a bit too caught up in things like prestige, which I didn't really care too much about either. So that's something you definitely want to consider. But I think that for like teachers, my teachers actually weren't too happy with like the fact that I only applied to one school, but it's very hard to explain like my reason to them for only applying to one school, because I was okay with being rejected, and if I was rejected I would just apply again. But I think sometimes older generations tend to think that like you must get it right on the first try, and I think it's okay. It's definitely difficult to explain, but yeah, so I had to do a bit of explaining on why I was only going to choose to apply to one school. But when it comes to friends, I think I had really great friends. They were really supportive. They were always helping me, like even reminding me about deadlines and stuff. So the people I actually kept in loop with regards to like my uni applications are definitely my friends. And I think that it's, even though maybe I didn't have the best support from my parents, I definitely got enough support and help from my friends who are really always there for me. Yeah.
I think the most general and strongest thought that you should have in yourself is to believe in yourself. In my case, I had conflict with my counselor regarding my UCAS personal statement because he thought it isn't enough for some reason. I don't exactly remember, but so I had a 1 hour kind of conversation conflict. But I felt that that essay was going to get me into Imperial. So I just believed in myself and applied with it. I didn't care because like it's my essay and it's my university. He's not the one who's going to the university. So believe in yourself. And I think also students get pressured with social media where like students get accepted, especially with UK, there isn't a specific day the decision is released and you go to websites and see that someone got accepted with this score and that score, and you started to get worried that you might not be able to go into this school when you're like when you didn't apply yet or when you actually applied. Just think that if you're going to get into that school, you will get into that school. Everybody has a different circumstance and the universities know it, and they will pick you if they think you're the student that will shine their institution later. So don't worry about it and always believe in yourself.
Oh yeah, and agreeing with like what Seung said, imposter syndrome is a thing while applying to universities. They may push you. It might push you back from applying to certain university, maybe because of the prestige or their grades. But at the end, remember that predicted grades are only predicted, and you can always do better than those in final examinations, and that basically it's as much as UK is like quite academic based. The essay also matters, and it's not a hit or miss. I don't know how to explain myself. I just feel like throughout my application process, it was quite a lot of compare myself with others, seeing that, oh, this person got accepted, as Seung said, this person got accepted with a high grade than I do. What if I don't? Like maybe it's about to start asking yourself, what if I get in? Maybe start getting excited with, oh, looking for accommodation in your dream uni, just to get a bit of motivation. Maybe it's a bit too optimistic, but that could help you and your mental health just keep going through application process, since UK applications start that early.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to the conversation about like navigating with your school counselors and teachers. So you really need to find a balance between like doing what you believe is right, and then also remembering that they do like see loads of people go through the system every year. So I know I said before like they went to university like 20 years ago, but also they do see people in exactly your situation every single year. So do use like your school systems of support wherever you can. I know it's quite easy to kind of build up, like I have a lot of students who I tutor, and it's like really easy to build up like tension and antagonisms with your teacher when you're struggling, but try to overcome that because they are like in one of the best situations to help you out. So like talking to people like us is really helpful because like we just went through the experience, but try and balance that with people who also are in a teacher situation. So see people applying to university every year and have that kind of higher education insider knowledge.